right, this is a really difficult topic to succinctly put into a video, but I'm going to do my best to try, so please give me some, bear with me, give me some patience. Is Marvel Future Fight too easy? This is the question that I want to ask, but in doing so, I realize that I have to actually answer a lot of different questions. I do think Marvel Future Fight is too easy, if you're wondering what my opinion is, but it also matters, of course, what your opinion is. Ultimately, it only really matters what the devs' opinions are if the game is too easy. And also whether they want the game to be easy or not. So there's actually multiple questions here. Like, obviously, the first one is like, do you think Marvel Future Fight is too easy? And this has reverberations. This affects the game on many levels. You're thinking, well, Alex, it doesn't really matter if Marvel Future Fight is easy or not. I just care if I'm having fun in the game. And that's fair. But especially with mobile games, especially with games that involve gambling and spending money, the difficulty of the game fluctuating has real impacts and ramifications on the player base, because if a game becomes really easy, then the devs have to do different things to crank up the frustration to get people to spend, because ultimately that's what they want to do in these kinds of games. They want to get people to spend. Versus if the game is really difficult, then that just easily, right? Hey, the game is difficult, I want to make it easy, I spend money. It's very, very simple. But when the game is already easy, it's a little bit harder to design for the devs. And even if you don't care if the game is easy or not, think about the impact that Tier 4s had on the game. Think about the impact that Elite Gear had on the game. And if you're starting to feel like, I don't really care. Like Tier 4s were cool 3 years ago. Elite Gear, I kind of don't care. That could be indicative. That could be a symptom of the game getting too easy. Because if these sorts of upgrades to characters, which is the basis of where you get your power from in order to make the content easier, if that stops mattering to you as the player, that can be a really big indication that the game is too easy. Or if you don't really care about the new systems that they implement, like, I don't really care about emblems, I can just ignore it, I can just ignore swords. If you can ignore, think about that, if you can ignore multiple different ways in which the game tries to give you power, even just by farming, right, not by spending money, then the game is too easy, right? I think, at least that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I don't think an easy game is what is best. That's sort of my secondary thing. Like, I think the game is too easy, and I also don't think easy is really where we should be heading with the game. But then that opens up a whole other host of questions, like, okay, if the game is too easy, why does it even matter, Alex? Like, is it okay? Doesn't the game, like, can't the game be easy, man? Not every game has to be difficult. If Marvel Future Fight continues to become easier, more of the content is going to feel like a chore. Versus if the game does try to become a little bit more Souls-like, a little bit more difficult, challenging, that's when you'll actually feel like you're authentically playing, piloting these different Marvel heroes and villains. And that, coupled with the art style and the overall quality of the game, is what I think separates it from other games. And that's my biggest argument, and I think my strongest, for why Marvel Future Fight should not become easier and more towards hyper-casual. I think, if anything, it should go towards a more difficult, challenging game style. So then I went down a rabbit hole. Okay, bear with me here, because there's obviously multiple different genres of games. Right now, Marvel Future Fight exists as an ARPG game, but we know in the space of gaming, in mobile and console and whatever PC gaming, especially recently, a lot of new genres have popped up that have become really, really popular, right? Two genres that I want to focus on today in the video that make sense the most are sort of at either end of the spectrum. On the one end, you have like hyper casual games. And so I want to first highlight hyper casual games because they exist on the super easy side of things. What are hyper casual games? Well, according to Google, and this is not AI, you've got stuff like Flappy Bird, Crossy Road, The Crowd City, with, the guys who, blue and red on either side. You have things like Candy Crush Saga, Magic Tiles 3, WormZone.io, or any of the .io, the itchy, whatever kinds of games. Count Masters, sort of like the AI slop content that you see in TikTok ads. Games where you're just counting up to a number. Just very, very simplistic games, very kind of brain-dead games, bridge race. These are kind of like your hyper-casual genre, your match 3, kind of just like press the screen, and this sort of thing. This is your hyper-casual genre. And I want to, then highlight on the opposite end of things. So think about what some of the most difficult games are that you've ever played, whether they're mobile games or not. They don't have to be mobile games. They're probably Souls-like games. And Souls-like games refers to Dark Souls. And they've actually become really, really popular. Both of these genres have actually become increasingly popular, right? We see lots of ads for Souls-like games, whether it's like Lives of P, all the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne games, all the other FromSoft games. And even in the mobile genre, they've started to create Souls-like games. Or like sort of pixelated games that are sort of Souls-like, Castlevania, Metroidvania-like, like Blasphemy or Blasphemous or whatever it's called. There's lots. And so they sort of exist on these two sides on either ends of the gaming spectrum, where these are extremely difficult games, the Souls-like games, and then the hyper-casual are extremely easy. And you can see how, the majority of hyper-casual games are mobile, and the majority of Souls-like games are console or PC. That kind of makes sense. But there's still quite a bit of overlap, right? You have lots of hyper-casual games on Steam sales for 99 cents. You have tons of Souls games being ported to mobile for a fee or whatever, so that people can play it on their phones as phones become increasingly more powerful. So these are the two genres. Well, how does Marvel Future Fight fit into this? So I did a little bit of digging here, and over on Netmarble's website, they have a bunch of their games that they list, and they talk about the service region, they talk about the tags, whatever. But you can see with the lifespan of certain games and sort of the trajectory of certain IPs where Netmarble appears to be going and could be going with Marvel. Not necessarily Marvel Future Fight, but possibly. They canceled King of Fighters All-Stars, KOFAS, and they released the King of Fighters AFK. AFK is sort of like synonymous with this sort of like hyper-casual mentality, or at least super-casual mentality. They also, in my opinion, reduced production and reduced the quality and the output of updates on 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross in order to focus on sort of two competing 7 Deadly Sins games. One being 7 Deadly Sins Origin, which I would argue is closer to Souls-like games because it's like a Genshin copy. But the other is an idle game, which is idle, again, is another word for AFK, which is another word for hyper-casual. So you can see this sort of like descent, in my opinion, into hyper-casualization of a lot of the titles for Netmarble's lists and games here. And you also know that some of their games recently that didn't do so well, Marvel Future Revolution, and also Kabam, that's now merged with Netmarble. Before they were merged, they had that kind of MOBA game. I can't even remember what it's called now. But there was like a MOBA game that they had released for less than a year, and then they shut it down before it even globally released. Both of those met an early end, but they were more on the complex side of things. They were less casual. So there's sort of pros and cons to both. If you go over to Netmarble's EMEA website, which is I think a subsidiary, or like it's part of the company, but it's for a different region of the world, you can see that they are on the pulse for hyper-casual and hyper-casual 2.0 games, including this, this dog game, probably like a Subway Surfers clone. You can just see by the icons that the majority of the games they're listing here are actually casual or hyper-casual, and you can actually see Marvel Future Fight here. Now, to be fair, this is not the best resource to showcase, because they are still showing off the Future Revolution icon, which the game doesn't exist anymore. But clearly, in my opinion, Netmarble has somewhat of a focus, has their eye on the hyper-casual and casual markets. And so it would make sense to an extent that they're trying to casualize some of their existing titles. And you can see this in Marvel Future Fight with things like making GBR easier not once but twice, right? They made GBR easier recently, and they made it easier a year ago or 8 months ago when they reduced Dormammu's HP. They did it more recently by adding the extra buff during the co-op skill, which just makes it easier by giving you more power for free. And, in addition to that, what I've already highlighted is the existing content just not feeling mandatory, not feeling like you really need to engage with any of this unless you're a huge whale, because the game is just not that difficult. Even recent World Boss Legends, people have said, despite these being the newest Legends, they're actually kind of easy. Ebony Maw and Black Dwarf, although they hit pretty hard, don't have a lot of undodgeable or sort of like, one-shot mechanics like some of the other bosses had back in the day. And even Thanos, the most recent World Boss Legend Plus, has basically a bunch of skippable half phases. So you can 1 or 2 shot him very, very easily, which isn't really the pinnacle of difficulty, if you ask me, despite being heralded as the most difficult boss so far. And so it kind of begs this question of where the game is going and why hyper casualization might be a bad thing. Now, in addition to that, I do want to highlight the growing trend of Souls-like games becoming more popular, because I think this is kind of the best argument that I have as to why I think Marvel Future Fight shouldn't go easier, and sort of make my pitch for why hyper casualization is not good. We have this LinkedIn article talking about the outlook of the Souls-like game market. And again, I'm not saying that Marvel Future Fight should become a Souls-like game. Should become punishingly difficult. We should have health flasks and all this. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's clearly an appetite from players in general, from gamers, for difficult games, right? Which is the inverse of what the Netmarble team might be arguing. Hey, the gamers really want the easiest possible thing. They just want to kind of face roll the content and fall asleep and still beat it. And so, yeah, this is kind of the argument that I'm trying to make. Obviously, there can be a tipping point. This CBR article, sorry, FromSoft fans, but there are too many Souls-like games. Sure, you can definitely oversaturate a market, but I also think that's the case with hyper-casual games. I do think that the market is a little bit oversaturated there. But then that led me to looking at the actual market. What does the actual gaming market at large, the gaming market, the mobile market, look like in terms of app success? And unfortunately, for the most part, this paints a picture of more casual games being more successful. So this doesn't really help my argument. I know the LinkedIn article was, on the one hand, this is on the other hand. So you do see a lot of the top free by downloads and top grossing by revenue are hyper-casual games. Royal Match, Monopoly Go, Whiteout Survival, Last War Survival, Candy Crush Saga, right? So 7 of the top 10 are hyper-casual. You do have some genuinely complex games that are difficult here, like Clash Royale at number 9. We've talked about this recently on the channel. Honor of Kings, number 4, which is like a MOBA, like League of Legends, and Roblox. Roblox is a little bit of a mixed bag here because you can have lots of games within Roblox. It's more of a sandbox, so I would probably ignore Roblox from that list. But a little bit further down, you have things like Delta Force, Pokemon Go. Like I wouldn't exactly call it casual, hyper casual, but it can be casual. And stuff like that. As you go a little bit further down, you have Genshin Impact, stuff like that, Crossfire, Umamuse, and that stuff. So that doesn't really help. And then I wanted to look at, lastly, the recent, this is very, very recent in terms of revenue for gacha games. And so this is kind of zoning in on the most, I would say that the closest possible type of game to Marvel Future Fight. And so I don't know these games that well, but I would hazard a guess, and you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I don't think Fate Grand Order is a hyper casual game. I could be wrong, but I don't think it is. Pokemon TCG Pocket, it's definitely hyper casual. Definitely hyper casual. I play that. Love and Deep Space, I'm just gonna guess that it's hyper casual. I don't know, but I'm just gonna guess. Judging by the name, judging by the icon, it's some kind of romance game. It's probably hyper casual. Umamuse, I don't think is hyper casual. It has dailies, it has farming. It's, I could be wrong. Honkai, for sure, I've played that, is definitely not hyper casual. Genshin Impact, definitely not hyper casual. I don't think Arknights is hyper casual. I could be wrong. Naruto Mobile, I don't think it's hyper casual. I could be wrong, but this is only available in China, I believe, at CN. Dokkan Battle, I don't think Dokkan Battle would be considered hyper casual. Again, I could be wrong. And then rounding out the top 10, you have Monster Strike, which I'm guessing is hyper casual. But this paints a slightly different picture, to be fair, right? This does paint the picture like hyper casual is the way to go in terms of downloads, obviously, because people just want to download and try a game, but also in terms of grossing, which is really where it matters, right? The money. And I can see Netmarble making the argument like, hey, guys, we're making Marvel Future Fight easier because that's what's going to make us more money. I get it. But then on the other hand, listen, they're making big bucks here. They're making big bucks. And the majority of the games here in the top 10, and this is a very accurate listing, and this is posted every month on Reddit for the I can't remember what it's called, the Gacha subreddit. Most of these games here in the top 10 are not hyper casual. And you can go down the list and you'll see more games that, in my opinion, are not hyper casual, like Wuwa. I think Nikke is probably hyper casual. I don't think Zenless Zone is hyper casual, and some others here. So where's Marvel Future Fight, you ask? Yeah, you wish, buddy. You wish. There you can see Grand Cross down here. It's down 21 points, but that's also not hyper casual. Oh, sorry, not hyper casual. But yeah. So that kind of leads me. It leads me with a big question mark, to be honest. Obviously, this is just my opinion, and at the end of the day, the devs are going to do whatever they want to do with the game, and that's up to them. But I personally think that going more casual is not the way to improve Marvel Future Fight. I know that sometimes I am critical of things that are the opposite of hyper casual in the game. Like, for example, the ranked tournament kind of represents something that's the opposite of hyper casual because it's the top 16. But it's hyper casual in a different way because you don't get to play the game mode. You're just setting teams and watching it autoplay, and there's just very little interaction whatsoever. So there is kind of a misleading lens with which you view some of the content in Marvel Future Fight. I think some of the best content, like World Boss, is not hyper casual, is not super casual. It's actually difficult. It's actually challenging. It's actually requires, hand-eye coordination, etc., timing. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that is what's most popular or most successful these days. I don't know. I mean, I still think World Boss is one of the most popular game modes, if not the most, but that is based more so on familiarity by players and also rewards than I think because of the difficulty. Like, I don't think a lot of players, most players, I don't think, go gravitate to World Boss because it's difficult. I think, if anything, I think players gravitate to World Boss and some of the other pieces of content because it feels the most like you're playing a game. I think with some of the autoplay content, particularly stuff like World Event, Multiverse Invasion, it doesn't really feel like you're playing a game. You're kind of just doing a chore. And so maybe that's what I should have led the video with, which is essentially that if Marvel Future Fight continues to become easier, more of the content is going to feel like a chore. Anyways, that's my spiel. That's my sort of essay on it. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you did make it to the end, I really appreciate it. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.